Hi, I'm Zion, 32 years old, and a software developer who finally achieved the American dream last year by purchasing my first house in Portland. Nothing extravagant, just a modest two-bedroom place that I've poured my heart into making my own. The guest room was my pride and joy, a space for friends and family to stay when visiting. Our Sunday family dinners were usually pleasant affairs, but last month, the atmosphere felt different. Something was off when my parents and pregnant sister Haley arrived. Before I tell you how my family tried to commandeer my home, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against your own family. Buying my house wasn't easy. For 3 years straight, I worked 60-plus-hour weeks, took on freelance projects, and sacrificed vacations and nights out to save for a down payment. I still remember the day my mortgage got approved, April 12th. I sat in my car outside the bank and cried. Real tears of joy. None of my friends owned property yet. In the current housing market, it felt like a minor miracle that I'd managed to pull it off before hitting my 30s. The house itself isn't anything spectacular by most standards, just 1,600 square feet, with a small yard backing up to a wooded area that gives the illusion of more space. The kitchen needed updating, and the bathroom had that distinct 80s vibe with powder blue tiles, but it was mine. Every squeaky floorboard and drafty window belonged to me, not some landlord who could raise the rent on a whim. That guest room, though, that was something special. I'd invested more in that room than any other part of the house. A quality queen-sized bed with a memory foam mattress, blackout curtains, a small writing desk by the window overlooking the backyard, and a smart television mounted on the wall. I'd even installed built-in shelves and filled them with books and small mementos that reflected my personality, but weren't so personal that guests would feel like they were intruding. The walls were painted a calming sage green, a color that my friend Thomas, who works in interior design, assured me would make people feel welcome and relaxed. My relationship with my family has always been close but complicated. My parents, Gerald and Martha, are good people who worked hard their whole lives. Dad spent 30 years at the same manufacturing company, and Mom was an elementary school administrator. They provided well for us, but emotional nuance wasn't their strong suit. From early on, there was a clear dynamic. I was the responsible one, and my sister Haley, 3 years younger, was the free spirit. This dynamic meant different expectations. When I got a B on a test, there were questions about why it wasn't an A. When Haley got a C, there was celebration that it wasn't a D. When I wanted to go to a concert in high school, I needed to present a detailed plan, including transportation and emergency contacts. When Haley wanted the same, she just had to promise to be careful. I don't resent my sister for this. It wasn't her fault, but over time it created an unspoken understanding that I would always be held to a higher standard. After college, I stayed in Portland while Haley bounced between cities and jobs, waitressing in Chicago, teaching English in Madrid, working at a ski resort in Colorado. Our parents worried about her lack of direction, but also romanticized her adventures in a way they never did, with my steady career progression in software development. When I bought my house, a new tradition emerged. Sunday dinners at my parents' place became a weekly fixture. Mom would cook, Dad would talk about retirement plans, and Haley would join when she was in town. It was nice a way to stay connected as adults. 3 months ago, Haley dropped a bombshell at one of these dinners. She was pregnant. The father was Marcus, a guy she'd been dating for about 8 months. He worked as a sound engineer at local venues, creative, talented, but with the financial instability that often comes with artistic careers. When she first told him about the pregnancy, he panicked and said he needed time to process. This left Haley uncertain about their future together. My parents' reaction to the pregnancy news was surprising. Rather than the concern or disappointment I half expected, they were ecstatic. Overnight, my mother transformed our childhood bedroom into a shrine to her unborn grandchild. She bought tiny clothes, researched the safest cribs, and downloaded a dozen apps tracking fetal development. My father started talking about college funds and family names. Their enthusiasm seemed to bypass any practical concerns about Haley's single status, uncertain relationship, or lack of stable income and housing. Throughout this whirlwind, I tried to be the supportive brother. I listened to Haley's fears during late-night phone calls. I loaned her money for medical appointments before her insurance kicked in. I helped her research parenting resources and create a budget. When she stayed overnight at my place to avoid our parents' overwhelming excitement, she used that guest room and commented on how peaceful it felt. That room meant more to me than just a place for visitors. It represented achievement, independence, and the kind of adult I wanted to be, someone with the means and space to welcome others properly. I had plans to eventually convert part of it into a home office as my remote work became more permanent. The room symbolized both my present success and my future potential. In the weeks following Haley's pregnancy announcement, our Sunday dinners took on a new focus. Every conversation somehow looped back to the baby. My mother brought paint swatches and crib catalogs. My father talked about installing better safety features in Haley's apartment. No one seemed concerned about Marcus's continued absence or Haley's financial situation. When I gently raised these practical matters, I was told not to rain on the parade or worry so much. The pattern established in our childhood, continued Haley's life, was approached with optimistic faith that everything would work out, while I was expected to be practical about everything except Haley's situation. The Sunday that changed everything started normally enough. I spent the morning catching up on work, then drove the familiar 20-minute route to my parents' suburban home. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across their well-maintained lawn as I pulled into the driveway. I noticed Haley's car already there, which was unusual. She typically arrived just in time or slightly late. Walking up to the house, I felt an undercurrent of tension before I even opened the door. Call it intuition, or just years of experience reading my family's moods, but something felt off. The usual sounds of my mother bustling in the kitchen, or my father watching sports in the living room, were absent. Instead, there was a strange, expectant quiet. "I'm here," I called out as I entered, hanging my jacket on the hook by the door, the same hook that had been mine since elementary school. In the dining room, my mother responded, her voice carrying an unusual pitch of barely contained excitement. They were all seated already, another departure from our usual routine of informal gathering in the kitchen while the final dinner preparations took place. My father sat at the head of the table, drumming his fingers on the wood. My mother was arranging flowers in a vase I hadn't seen before. Haley sat with her hands folded over her slightly rounded belly, wearing an expression I couldn't quite read, somewhere between nervous and apologetic. "Am I late?" I checked my watch, confused by the formal setup. "Right on time," my father said, checking his own watch, as if confirming a scheduled appointment rather than a family meal. "We're just eager to get started. Your mother made pot roast." The table was set with the good china, the set reserved for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and there were candles unlit but positioned as if for a special occasion. My mother had prepared all my favorite foods: pot roast with carrots and potatoes, homemade rolls, and I could smell apple pie baking in the oven. It felt like a birthday dinner, except it wasn't anyone's birthday. As we began to eat, the conversation felt forced. My mother peppered Haley with questions about how she was feeling, if she was getting enough rest, if the prenatal vitamins were helping with her morning sickness. My father kept steering the conversation toward baby-related topics. Had Haley thought about names yet? Was she hoping for a boy or a girl? Did she want to know the sex before birth, or be surprised? Throughout this, Haley responded quietly, picking at her food more than eating it. Her typical animated storytelling was absent. She didn't make eye contact with me, which was particularly strange. I tried introducing neutral topics: a new project at work, a hiking trail I'd discovered near my house, a documentary I thought they might enjoy, but each attempt fell flat with minimal responses before someone circled back to the baby. My father checked his watch at least 5 times during the main course. My mother refilled Haley's water glass so frequently it became almost comical. The whole scene felt like bad community theater, everyone reciting lines without conviction while waiting for the main act. Finally, as my mother served the apple pie, my father cleared his throat with deliberate drama. He set down his fork, folded his hands on the table, and looked at me with what I recognized as his important announcement expression, the same look he'd worn when telling us about job changes or the time he'd decided to surprise my mother with a 20th anniversary cruise. "Zion," he began, his voice taking on a formal quality. "We've been thinking about the baby situation, and we've come up with the perfect solution." I nodded, taking a bite of pie, and assuming they were going to mention helping Haley with her apartment, or perhaps offering to host her at their house until she figured things out with Marcus. Your guest room would make an ideal nursery, he continued. It gets great natural light, it's a good size, and you have that second bathroom right across the hall. I froze mid-chew, the sweet taste of cinnamon and apple turning to cardboard in my mouth. We've already started looking at cribs and changing tables, my mother jumped in, excitement bubbling over. We found the most beautiful set at Burlington Baby. Solid wood converts to a toddler bed later. We thought the white would go nicely with your sage green walls. It's being delivered to your address next Tuesday, my father added casually, as if discussing the weather. We got a great deal, 20% off the floor model. The silence that followed felt thick enough to slice. I set down my fork, carefully aware that my hand had started to tremble slightly. Across from me, Haley studied her plate with intense concentration. I'm sorry, I finally managed, my voice sounding strangely distant to my own ears. You've ordered furniture. For my house. Without asking me. My mother waved a dismissive hand. We knew you wouldn't mind. You're always saying how that room doesn't get enough use. I've never said that, I replied, still struggling to process what was happening. Well, it doesn't, my father stated flatly. And Haley needs a place to stay until she gets on her feet with the baby. It makes perfect sense. You have all that space, my mother added. And you're barely home with all the hours you work. This way Haley and the baby will be taken care of, and you'll have company. I looked at my sister, who finally raised her eyes to meet mine. Her expression held a mixture of guilt and hope. Did you know about this? I asked her directly. They mentioned the idea to me, she admitted softly. I told them we should talk to you first, but we knew you'd want to help your sister, my mother interrupted. Family helps family, Zion. That's how we raised you. The disconnect between their planning and my reality felt surreal. They had made decisions about my home, my personal space that I had worked so hard for without even a courtesy conversation. The assumption that I would simply accommodate their plan without question reflected a fundamental lack of respect for my autonomy. I think we need to back up here, I said, trying to keep my voice level. This is the first I'm hearing about any of this, and you've already ordered furniture to be delivered to my house. Don't make a big deal about it, my father said with a frown. It's just a crib and a few essential items. We'll help with the rest of what she needs. That's not the point, I countered, feeling heat rise in my face. The point is that you made a significant decision about my home without even talking to me first. We're talking now, my mother said, her smile faltering slightly. And it's all settled. Haley can move in next weekend. I've already packed most of her things from her apartment. The realization that this wasn't a suggestion but a fait accompli hit me like a physical blow. They weren't consulting me. They were informing me of a decision already made. As the implications cascaded through my mind, my privacy, my routine, my space, all fundamentally altered without my input, I felt something shift inside me. A lifetime of accommodating my family's expectations collided with the boundaries I had only recently learned to establish as an independent adult. No, I said quietly. This isn't happening. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap before a storm. What do you mean, no? My father asked, his voice hardening. The concept seemed genuinely foreign to him that I might refuse this family directive. I mean that I'm not converting my guest room into a nursery, and Haley isn't moving into my house. I clarified, keeping my tone as neutral as possible, despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. My mother's expression shifted from confusion to hurt. Zion, this is your sister we're talking about. Your sister and your niece or nephew. I understand that, I said. And I want to help Haley, but not like this. Not by having someone move into my home without any discussion or consent. It's just temporary. My father insisted, emphasizing each syllable as if speaking to someone with limited comprehension, until she gets back on her feet, maybe 6 months, a year at most. A year, I repeated the time frame, making the situation even more absurd. Your house is too big for just one person anyway, my mother interjected. All that space going to waste when your sister needs help. This comment struck a particular nerve. My too big house was a modest 2-bedroom that I had stretched my finances to afford specifically so I could have a guest room and home office. The suggestion that my personal space was somehow wasted if not being used by others felt deeply invalidating. My house is exactly the right size for my life, I responded firmly. I bought it with specific purposes in mind, and turning the guest room into a permanent nursery isn't one of them. My father leaned forward, his expression shifting to the one he used when making what he considered a compelling argument. Zion, you have a responsibility here. You're established, financially secure. Haley is facing single motherhood. As her brother, it's your duty to step up. The word duty triggered memories of countless childhood moments when my personal preferences were subordinated to family expectations. The time I had to give up summer camp to help with Haley's swim lessons. The college scholarship interview I missed to drive Haley to an audition when my parents couldn't. Plinks, the graduation party cut short because Haley had an emotional crisis over a breakup. Each instance reinforced the message Haley's needs came first. I'm happy to help Haley, I said, turning to look directly at my sister, who had remained suspiciously quiet. But I need to hear from her. Is this what you want, Haley? Moving into my house was your idea? Haley fidgeted with her napkin, her eyes darting between our parents before settling on me. Not exactly, she admitted. Mom and Dad suggested it when Marcus and I started having problems. What kind of problems, I asked, realizing I hadn't heard much about Marcus lately. Haley sighed, her hand unconsciously moving to her baby bump. He's freaking out about becoming a father. Said he needs space to think about whether he can handle it. He's been staying at his friend's place for the last 2 weeks. This was news to me. Despite our regular conversations, Haley had downplayed the extent of the relationship troubles. I felt a surge of genuine concern for her situation, separate from the boundary violation at hand. I didn't know things had gotten that bad, I said more gently. Tears welled in Haley's eyes. I didn't want to worry you. And then Mom and Dad started making all these plans, saying how perfect it would be if I lived with you, how you could help with the baby while I figured things out. Her voice trailed off. We've already told everyone it's settled, she added, in a small voice. Grandma, my friends, everyone thinks I'm moving in with you next week. The manipulation became clearer. My parents had not only made decisions about my home without consulting me, but had created social pressure by announcing these plans to our extended family and Haley's social circle. They had manufactured a situation where my refusal would make me appear cruel and unsupportive. That wasn't fair to Zion, my mother acknowledged unexpectedly, though her next words undermined the admission. But we knew once he understood the situation he'd want to help. You've always been the responsible one, Zion. The one we could count on. And there it was, the familiar pattern laid bare. My role as the responsible one wasn't a compliment. It was an expectation that I would accommodate everyone else's needs at the expense of my own. A lifetime of memories cascaded through my mind. Age 8, giving up my new bike so Haley could learn to ride, because she'd outgrown her tricycle and my parents didn't want to buy another bicycle that year. Age 16, having my curfew strictly enforced, while Haley at 13 was allowed to stay out later because she has a different social personality. Age 22, being pressured to take a job near home to help the family, while Haley was encouraged to see the world after college. Each instance reinforced the dynamic. My boundaries were flexible, negotiable, ultimately unimportant in the family hierarchy of needs. It was a pattern I had only begun to recognize and address in therapy over the past 2 years. I understand Haley needs support right now, I said, choosing my words carefully. But moving her into my home without even asking me first isn't the right way to provide that support. There are other options we could discuss together. Like what my father challenged. Her apartment lease is up at the end of the month. Marcus is unreliable. She needs stability for the baby. Maybe she could stay here with you and Mom, I suggested reasonably. You have more space than I do, and you're both talking about retirement soon. The horrified expressions that crossed both my parents' faces would have been comical in another context. We can't have a baby in the house at our age, my mother protested. The crying, the sleep deprivation, we're in our 60s. But you expect me to handle it while working 60-hour weeks, I asked, the double standard glaringly obvious. You're young, my father said dismissively. You can adjust better. Besides, my mother added, we already help by babysitting during the day when you're at work. We've got it all planned out. Their entire solution had been constructed without considering my input, my needs, or the practical reality of my life. They had decided what role I would play in this scenario without bothering to ask if it was a role I wanted or could sustain. "I want to help Haley," I repeated, turning to my sister. "I can help you find a new apartment, contribute to the security deposit, maybe even help with some monthly expenses until you get child support sorted out with Marcus. But I can't have you and a newborn moving into my house." Rather than appreciation for these offers of substantial help, my parents' expressions darkened with disapproval. The message was clear. Anything short of complete acquiescence to their plan was insufficient. "I never thought my own son would be so selfish," my mother said, quietly wielding the word like a weapon. My mother's accusation of selfishness hung in the air like poison gas, suffocating any chance of reasonable discussion. The familiar hot flush of shame, a physiological response, conditioned by years of similar accusations, whenever I prioritized my needs, crept up my neck. "Wanting basic respect for my home and boundaries isn't selfish," I countered, struggling to maintain my composure. "It is when your sister needs you," my father shot back, his volume increasing. "This isn't some stranger asking for favors, Zion. This is family. Family should respect each other's boundaries," I insisted. "Family should have conversations before making major decisions that affect everyone." "Oh, so now we need formal permission to help your sister." My father's face had reddened, a vein visibly pulsing at his temple. "What happened to the values we raised you with, family first always?" Haley abruptly pushed back from the table, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. Tears streamed down her face as she hurried from the dining room toward the bathroom down the hall. The sound of the door slamming punctuated her exit. "Now look what you've done," my mother hissed, throwing her napkin on the table. "Upsetting a pregnant woman. Are you proud of yourself?" The injustice of this accusation, when they had orchestrated this entire situation, ignited something in me. Years of swallowing my frustration to keep the peace threatened to erupt all at once. "I didn't upset her," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "This situation you've created is upsetting her, putting her in the middle of a conflict that could have been avoided with a simple conversation before you started making plans for my house." My mother stood and went after Haley, pausing in the doorway to deliver a parting shot. "I never thought I'd see the day when my son would abandon his own sister when she needs him most." Alone with my father, the tension in the room thickened. He leaned forward, lowering his voice as if sharing a confidence, though his tone remained harsh. "Here's what's really happening, Zion. The furniture delivery is scheduled for Tuesday at 10 in the morning. I've already given them your house key for access in case you're at work." The statement hit me like a physical blow. "You did what?" "The spare key you gave us for emergencies," he clarified, as if that made the violation any less severe. "It just made sense since you're at the office most days. You gave strangers access to my house without telling me." The boundary violation kept expanding in ways I hadn't imagined possible. He waved off my concern. "It's not strangers, it's the delivery service from Burlington Baby. Very reputable." My mind raced with implications. What else had they done without my knowledge? "Have you been in my house recently?" I asked, a terrible suspicion forming. My father's momentary hesitation confirmed my fears before he spoke. "We took Haley over last weekend to measure the room. You were at that work conference in Seattle. You entered my house when I wasn't home, without asking or even telling me." Each revelation felt worse than the last. "Don't be so dramatic," he dismissed. "We're your parents, not burglars. We were just helping Haley plan the nursery layout. She thinks the crib would look best under the window, but your mother is concerned about drafts." The casual way he referenced their trespassing and redesign plans for my home left me momentarily speechless. I struggled to process the multiple violations of trust and respect occurring simultaneously. "We even picked up some paint samples," he continued, oblivious to my mounting horror. "That sage green is nice, but something warmer would be better for a baby. Haley likes a pale yellow." "You're planning to repaint my guest room?" I asked incredulously. "Well, it won't be a guest room anymore," he stated, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "It'll be the nursery. Try to keep up, Zion." The condescension in his tone broke something in me. The careful restraint I'd maintained began to crumble. "This is insane," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. You can't just decide to renovate parts of my house without my permission. I own that house. It's my property, not a family commune. My father's expression hardened. Don't take that tone with me. We're trying to solve a family crisis here, and you're acting like we're imposing on you. This is your niece or nephew we're talking about. And I care about them, I insisted. But that doesn't mean surrendering my home and privacy without any say in the matter. Privacy, he scoffed. What do you need all that privacy for anyway? It's not like you're bringing home a different girl every weekend. The jab at my relationship status, I'd been single for about a year following a difficult breakup, felt particularly low. It also revealed another dimension to their plan. They saw my single status as making my space available for family use, as if being unmarried meant my home was somehow less legitimate, less mine. My relationship status has nothing to do with this, I said firmly, and it doesn't make my home any less mine. My mother returned to the dining room, her expression grim. Haley's lying down in her old room. Her blood pressure seems elevated. I hope you're satisfied. Before I could respond to this blatant guilt trip, she continued with what felt like a rehearsed speech. There's something else you should know, Zion. Your father and I have been talking, and we think it's only fair that you help with Haley's expenses for the baby. She'll need a lot of support, and since you're doing so well financially, the audacity left me momentarily stunned. Not only were they planning to move my sister into my house without permission, but they also expected me to financially support her and the baby. Let me get this straight, I said slowly. You want me to give up my guest room privacy and routine to house my sister and her newborn, and you expect me to help pay for the baby's expenses? Don't say it like that, my mother chided. You make it sound like a burden instead of a blessing. This is your family, your own flesh and blood. And what about my life? My choices? Don't they matter at all in this family? My father's face darkened. When you have a child depending on you, you'll understand that personal convenience takes a back seat. Your sister needs our help, all of our help. I've offered help, I reminded them. Financial assistance, help finding an apartment, ongoing support. But that's not enough for you, is it? The only acceptable solution is the one where I sacrifice my home and autonomy. Now you're just being unnecessarily difficult, my father declared, his patience visibly evaporating. This isn't a negotiation, Zion. It's what's happening. The furniture arrives Tuesday. Haley moves in next weekend. If you really care about your sister, you'll stop making this harder than it needs to be. The ultimatum was clear: acquiesce to their plan, or be labeled selfish, uncaring, a bad brother. It was emotional blackmail, pure and simple. My heart pounded in my chest. Sweat beaded along my hairline. A familiar tightness constricted my breathing. The physical manifestations of the stress response that had become all too familiar in family conflicts throughout my life. In the past, this was the moment I would cave. The physical discomfort of conflict, combined with the emotional weight of their disapproval, typically led me to surrender my position to restore peace. I'd done it countless times before, swallowing my objections, accepting their decisions, adjusting my life to accommodate family demands, while receiving minimal consideration in return. But something was different this time. Perhaps it was the therapy I'd been doing, learning to recognize and validate my own needs. Perhaps it was the hard-won independence represented by my home. Or perhaps it was simply that this boundary violation was so egregious, so fundamentally disrespectful, that acquiescence felt impossible. Whatever the reason, as I sat at my parents' dining table, the sight of so many family negotiations in which I'd come out the loser, I felt something shift inside me. A lifetime of bending to maintain family harmony had created a pattern that would continue indefinitely unless I found the courage to break it. No, I said again, the word feeling stronger on my tongue this time. This isn't happening. Not like this. My father's face flushed a dangerous shade of red. What did you just say? I said no. I repeated, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. I won't be part of this plan. It's my house, and I get to decide who lives there and how the rooms are used. After everything we've done for you, my mother interjected, her voice trembling with emotion. All the sacrifices we made, and this is how you repay us, by abandoning your sister when she needs you most. The accusation stung, but I recognized it for what it was. a manipulation tactic that had worked effectively in the past. This time I refused to take the bait. "I'm not abandoning Haley," I clarified. "I'm setting a boundary about my home. There's a difference." "Boundaries," my father spat the word like it tasted foul. "Where did you pick up that therapy nonsense? Family doesn't have boundaries, Zion. Family is there for each other, period. Healthy families respect each other," I countered. "They don't make major decisions about each other's lives and property without consultation. They don't enter each other's homes without permission or give keys to strangers." My mother's tears flowed freely now, a display that had historically guaranteed my immediate surrender. "I don't even recognize you anymore. What happened to my sweet boy who always put family first?" "He grew up," I answered simply. "He bought a house and established a life that deserves basic respect." My father stood abruptly, his chair screeching against the floor. "Enough of this nonsense. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop this selfish behavior and do what's right for your sister. The furniture arrives Tuesday. Haley moves in Saturday. End of discussion." His tone, the one that had settled countless childhood disagreements with its finality, no longer held the same power. I remained seated, meeting his gaze steadily. "No, Dad. Here's what's actually going to happen. I'm going to call the furniture store tomorrow and cancel the delivery. I'm going to change my locks, and I'm going to help Haley find alternative arrangements that don't involve moving into my home." The stunned silence that followed felt like the aftermath of an explosion. My father's mouth opened and closed without sound, like a fish suddenly finding itself out of water. My mother's tears abruptly ceased as she stared at me in apparent disbelief. "You would go that far," she finally whispered. "Change your locks to keep your own family out. To protect my boundaries." "Yes," I confirmed. "I shouldn't have to, but you've left me no choice by entering my home without permission and giving my key to strangers." My father found his voice now dangerously quiet. "If you do this, if you turn your back on your sister when she needs, you don't expect things to be the same between us." The threat was implicit but clear: fall in line or face family estrangement. It was the nuclear option, the ultimate leverage they believed would force my compliance. In that moment, standing at the precipice of potential family rupture, I felt a surprising calm. The anxiety that had been building throughout the confrontation receded, replaced by a clarity I hadn't anticipated. "I'm sorry you see it that way," I said. "I'm not turning my back on Haley. I'm offering substantial help that respects everyone's needs, including mine. If that's not enough for you, then maybe we do need some distance, until you can respect my boundaries." "Get out," my father said, pointing toward the door. "Get out of this house until you're ready to be part of this family properly." I stood slowly, feeling oddly detached from the drama unfolding. "I'll always be part of this family, Dad. But being family doesn't mean sacrificing my autonomy or allowing my boundaries to be violated." "Just go," my mother sobbed, turning away, as if she couldn't bear to look at me. I walked to the hallway, pausing outside Haley's childhood bedroom. After a moment's hesitation, I knocked gently. "Haley, it's me. Can we talk before I leave?" There was no response. After waiting a reasonable time, I called through the door. "I'll call you tomorrow. We'll figure something out, I promise." The drive home felt surreal. Streetlights blurred through unexpected tears as the adrenaline of confrontation gave way to the emotional aftermath. My phone buzzed repeatedly in my pocket, likely my parents continuing the argument via text, but I left it untouched until I was safely home. When I finally checked, the messages were exactly what I'd expected. From Dad: "Your behavior tonight was inexcusable. Your mother is devastated." From Mom: "How could you do this to Haley? She's crying because of you." From Mom again: "Call us when you're ready to apologize and do the right thing." Then, unexpectedly, a message from my aunt, my mother's sister. "Your mother just called me very upset, said you refused to help Haley with the baby. That doesn't sound like you. What's going on?" The family phone tree had been activated. Soon every relative would have heard a version of events casting me as the villain who refused to help his pregnant sister. The knowledge should have intensified my distress, but instead it reinforced my resolve. This pattern of manipulation through family opinion had worked in the past because I cared deeply about how I was perceived. Now I found myself caring more about standing firm in my truth than managing others' perceptions of me. I sent a brief reply to my aunt. "There's more to the story. I'll call you tomorrow to explain." That night, sleep proved elusive. I paced through my house, suddenly seeing it through new eyes, not just as my personal space but as territory I needed to defend. The guest room, with its carefully chosen furnishings and peaceful green walls, now felt like a battlefield. I imagined it transformed against my will, yellow paint covering my chosen color baby furniture, replacing the desk where I sometimes worked, the quiet sanctuary, becoming a chaotic nursery. Around 3 in the morning, my phone rang with a call from Haley. I answered immediately. "Are you okay?" I asked. Her voice sounded congested from crying. "Number, everything's a mess. Mom and Dad are furious, and I'm caught in the middle." "I'm sorry about that," I said sincerely. "None of this is your fault." "Isn't it though?" she countered. "If I hadn't gotten pregnant, if I'd been more careful with Marcus." "Haley, stop. Your pregnancy isn't the issue here. The issue is Mom and Dad making decisions about my home without my input or consent." A long pause followed before she spoke again. "They really didn't tell you anything before tonight, did they?" "Not a word," I confirmed. "Did they let you believe I knew about this plan?" "They said they'd run it by you, and you were on board with the general idea," she admitted. "I should have checked with you directly. I'm sorry." Her apology, the first anyone had offered me since this began, loosened something tight in my chest. "It's okay. We can figure this out together without them dictating terms." "I don't know what to do, Zion," she said, her voice small. "My lease is up. Marcus is being flaky, and I'm scared about doing this alone." "You're not alone," I assured her. "I'm here for you, just not in the way Mom and Dad decided. Can we meet tomorrow, just the two of us? Talk through some real options." She agreed to meet for coffee the next afternoon. As I finally fell into an exhausted sleep around dawn, I realized the weekend had become a crucible testing not just my relationship with my family, but my relationship with myself and my own autonomy. The next morning brought new challenges. A call from the furniture store confirmed my parents had indeed scheduled a delivery to my address. When I attempted to cancel it, I discovered they had paid a non-refundable deposit using my name and address. Untangling this required multiple calls and the humiliating explanation that no, I hadn't authorized this purchase. Later, a text from my father informed me that he had told the neighbors to expect delivery trucks on Tuesday, adding another layer of social complication to unwind. By Sunday afternoon, I had received calls or texts from 2 uncles, an aunt, my grandmother, and 3 cousins, all expressing varying degrees of concern, disappointment, or outright criticism of my refusal to help family. The coordinated pressure campaign was as transparent as it was effective at raising my stress levels. Despite all this, when I met Haley at a small coffee shop equidistant from our homes, I felt a strange sense of calm. The worst had happened, I had stood my ground and faced the family fallout, and I was still standing. Something that had terrified me for years had occurred, and while painful, it hadn't destroyed me. The coffee shop provided neutral territory for Haley and me to talk without our parents' influence. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, contrasting sharply with the pregnancy glow everyone talks about but few actually experience. I called a locksmith this morning. I told her after we'd settled with our drinks decaf for her triple espresso for me after my sleepless night. "They're coming tomorrow to change all the locks." She winced, but nodded understanding. "I don't blame you. What Mom and Dad did was way over the line." Her acknowledgement felt like a small victory. "I also spoke with my therapist," I continued. "She helped me draft an email to send to Mom and Dad, clearly outlining my boundaries." "You're in therapy?" Haley seemed surprised. "For about 2 years now," I admitted. "It's been helping me recognize some unhealthy patterns in our family dynamic." Haley stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "Like how they've always treated us differently. You as the responsible one who can handle anything, and me as the fragile one who needs protecting." Her insight caught me off guard. I'd assumed she was unaware of, or benefited too much from the disparity to notice. "Exactly like that," I confirmed. "It's created a situation where my boundaries aren't respected while your independence isn't fostered." "Tell me about it," she sighed. "They're treating me like I'm completely incapable of handling this pregnancy. Every decision, every plan, they're taking over everything like I'm 16 instead of 29. This shift in perspective from confronting each other to recognizing we were both struggling under our parents' controlling behavior changed the entire conversation. For perhaps the first time as adults, Haley and I were truly allies rather than participants in our parents' assigned roles. "So what do you actually want?" I asked her directly. "Not what mom and dad want for you, but what you want for yourself and your baby." She looked startled by the question, as if no one had bothered to ask her genuine preference. "I want independence," she said, slowly working it out as she spoke. "I want to create a stable home for my baby, but on my terms. I want Marcus involved if he's willing to step up, but I need to be prepared to do this alone if necessary." She paused, then added, "And I don't want to be treated like an incompetent child by our parents for the rest of my life." "That all sounds completely reasonable," I assured her. "But I am scared, Zion," she admitted. "Financially, emotionally, all of it. I've never been good with money like you are. The thought of rent and baby expenses and possibly doing it all alone, it's overwhelming." This vulnerability, genuine, rather than the performative helplessness our parents often elicited from her, moved me. It was an opening for real support, rather than imposed solutions. "What if we approach this differently?" I suggested. "Instead of you moving in with me, what if I helped you find your own place? I could assist with the security deposit, maybe help with rent for a few months until you're on your feet." Her eyes widened. "You'd do that?" "Of course I would. You're my sister and I want to help, just not by having my boundaries completely ignored." "That would be amazing," she said, a hint of genuine smile appearing for the first time. "I'd feel so much better having my own space that's just for me and the baby." We spent the next hour looking at apartment listings on my laptop. With my financial help, she could afford something decent in a safe neighborhood not far from my place. We created a realistic budget accounting for baby expenses, explored daycare options, and discussed potential work-from-home opportunities that would allow her more flexibility as a new mother. "What about Marcus?" I asked eventually. "Where does he stand in all this?" Haley's expression clouded. "I honestly don't know. He panicked when I told him about the pregnancy, but he hasn't completely disappeared. He texts to ask how I'm doing, but whenever I try to discuss concrete plans, he gets vague." "Have you told him about mom and dad's plans?" I asked carefully. "God, no," she said with a small laugh. "That would send him running for sure. Hey, not only am I pregnant, but my parents are trying to move me into my brother's house and convert his guest room into a nursery without asking." Real reassuring to a guy already freaking out about commitment. Her humor about the situation suggested a healthier perspective than I'd given her credit for. It reinforced my growing realization that our parents' infantilizing approach to Haley was more about their needs than hers. "Maybe we should talk to him," I suggested. "Not pressure him, but at least give him a chance to step up if he wants to. Sometimes guys need a little time to process big changes." She considered this. "Maybe. He's not a bad person, just scared. And mom and dad treating him like he's already failed as a father hasn't helped." By the time we parted, we had a concrete plan. I would help Haley secure an apartment with a short-term lease to give her flexibility. We would meet with Marcus together to discuss co-parenting possibilities without pressure or judgment. Most importantly, we would present a united front to our parents, making it clear that we had our own solution that respected everyone's needs and boundaries. The confrontation with our parents took place the following weekend at their house again, but under very different circumstances. I had changed my locks, canceled the furniture delivery though it cost me the non-refundable deposit, and sent a clear email outlining my boundaries and the consequences for violating them. The responses had been predictably emotional accusations of selfishness, family disloyalty, and dramatic declarations of parental heartbreak. But I had remained firm. Haley and I arrived together, a deliberate choice to demonstrate our united front. My father opened the door with a frosty expression that suggested he viewed my presence as a conditional privilege rather than a right. "We're here to talk," I said simply. "All of us as adults." The living room felt charged with tension as we settled into our seats. My mother's red-rimmed eyes suggested she'd been crying, while my father's rigid posture communicated defensive anger. "Haley and I have been working on a solution," I began without preamble. one that respects everyone's needs and boundaries. "We don't need to hear about your boundaries again," my father interrupted. "We get it. You won't help your sister." "That's not true," Haley interjected with surprising firmness. "Zion is helping me, just not in the way you decided without asking either of us." Her defense of me clearly caught our parents off guard. The script they'd been following, dutiful daughter abandoned by selfish brother, suddenly didn't match the actual dynamics in the room. Together we outlined our plan: the apartment I would help Haley secure, the financial support I'd provide, the co-parenting discussion with Marcus, and the boundaries that would allow all of us to support Haley while respecting each other's autonomy. "This won't work," my mother protested immediately. "Haley needs family around her, not some impersonal apartment." "I'll be 5 minutes away," I pointed out. "Close enough to help, but with separate living spaces. And I need my own place," Mom, Haley added. "I'm about to become a mother myself. I need to establish my own home, not move into someone else's." My father shook his head, unconvinced. "This is unnecessarily complicated. Our plan was simpler and more economical." "Your plan didn't consider what either of us actually wanted," I replied. "This solution addresses Haley's needs for support while respecting my home and privacy." The discussion continued in circles, with my parents raising objections that Haley and I calmly addressed. The breakthrough came unexpectedly from a source none of us anticipated. Halfway through the tense conversation, the doorbell rang. My mother answered and returned with Marcus looking nervous but determined. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, glancing around at our surprised faces. "Haley texted me. You were all talking about plans for the baby. I thought I should be here." The dynamic shifted instantly. My parents, who had been dismissing Marcus as unreliable and uncommitted, suddenly had to contend with his physical presence and apparent interest in being involved. "I know I freaked out at first," he addressed Haley directly. "It was a lot to process. But I've been thinking about everything, and I want to be part of our baby's life. A real part, not just weekends or whatever." The conversation that followed transformed our family planning entirely. Marcus had been exploring options too, looking at 2-bedroom apartments he and Haley could afford together, researching parent-friendly employers with better benefits, even taking an online course about infant care. "I'm still scared," he admitted candidly. "But I want to try to make this work, us raising our kid together, even if we're figuring out our relationship as we go." His sincerity was palpable, and even my skeptical father seemed impressed by his willingness to face the situation directly. By the end of the afternoon, a new plan had emerged. Haley and Marcus would find an apartment together with my financial help for the initial expenses. My parents would provide childcare support when needed, and I would be the involved uncle I'd always planned to be, on my terms. This solution, organic, collaborative, and respectful of everyone's agency, accomplished what my parents' high-handed planning never could. It created a sustainable support system for Haley and her baby, while preserving the boundaries necessary for healthy adult relationships. As Marcus and Haley left together discussing apartment viewings scheduled for the following day, I saw my mother watching them with a mixture of emotions: pride, concern, and perhaps a touch of loss as she recognized her daughter truly stepping into independent adulthood. "This might actually work better," she admitted quietly to me, the first acknowledgement that our solution had merit. "It will," I assured her, "because everyone had a voice in creating it, instead of having it imposed on them." The first Sunday dinner after our confrontation was undeniably awkward. Conversation remained stilted, with my mother's excessive politeness and my father's minimal engagement, creating an atmosphere that felt more like a business meeting than a family gathering. Haley and Marcus attended together, their united presence changing the family dynamic in ways still being negotiated. "How's the apartment hunting going?" I asked them, attempting to navigate toward neutral territory. "We found a place," Haley announced, genuine excitement breaking through the tension. 2 bedrooms in that new complex on Riverside. We sign the lease next week." My mother's smile looked slightly forced. "That's wonderful, though it seems far from everything." "It's 10 minutes from Zion's place, and 15 from yours," Marcus pointed out reasonably. "Plus it has that playground right across the street, and is within walking distance of the pediatrician's office we like." The practical considerations he raised, evidence of real planning rather than impulsive decisions, seemed to catch my parents off guard. They were adjusting slowly, and sometimes reluctantly, to the reality that Haley and Marcus were taking responsibility for their situation rather than surrendering control to parental authority. Over the following months, a new pattern gradually established itself. The initial frost of disapproval thawed as my parents witnessed Haley and Marcus creating a stable home for their coming child. My mother redirected her enthusiasm for grandparenthood into more appropriate channels, organizing a proper baby shower, purchasing practical gifts with permission, offering advice when asked, rather than imposing it unilaterally. My father took longer to adjust his pride, still bruised by my unprecedented resistance to his authority. But even he eventually found his place in the new family arrangement, helping Marcus install baby safety features in the new apartment, and offering cautious financial advice when solicited. My relationship with Haley deepened in unexpected ways. The shared experience of standing up to our parents' controlling tendencies created a new bond between us. We began meeting regularly for lunch, just the two of us, building the adult-sibling relationship we'd never quite managed to establish before. "You know what's weird?" she commented during one of these lunches, her pregnancy now in its third trimester. "I think Mom and Dad actually respect me more now that I'm making my own decisions instead of just going along with their plans. They're adjusting to seeing us as actual adults," I agreed. "It's uncomfortable for them, but necessary. I never would have had the courage to push back without seeing you do it first," she admitted. "You kind of broke the spell for all of us." 5 months after our Sunday dinner confrontation, my niece Eliza entered the world 7 pounds 4 ounces of new life that instantly rearranged all our priorities. The hospital waiting room represented our new family dynamic and physical space, my parents nervously pacing, Marcus alternating between the delivery room and updates to the waiting family, me calmly providing practical support by coordinating food deliveries and fielding messages from extended family. When I finally held my niece, her tiny fingers wrapping instinctively around my thumb, the remaining tension from our family conflict seemed suddenly insignificant compared to this new life we would all help nurture. The boundaries I'd fought to establish didn't diminish my love for this child or my commitment to being present in her life. They simply ensured that presence would be healthy and sustainable rather than resentful and imposed. In the year since Eliza's birth, our family has found a new equilibrium. Haley and Marcus navigate co-parenting with the normal challenges and joys of new parenthood, sometimes together romantically, sometimes apart, but always united in their commitment to their daughter. My parents have embraced their grandparent role with enthusiasm tempered by a newfound respect for boundaries, checking before visiting, asking rather than directing, offering help without assumption. And my guest room remains exactly that, a guest room where Haley, Marcus, and Eliza occasionally stay for visits that are planned and mutually agreed upon. When they visit, the room transforms temporarily with a portable crib and baby toys, but returns to its original purpose when they leave. This arrangement, flexible, respectful, consensual, provides all the family connection without the boundary violations that caused such conflict. The journey of healing with my parents has been gradual and sometimes halting. There have been moments of regression to old patterns quickly addressed before they could take root again. There have been difficult conversations about the family dynamics that created our conflict in the first place. But these discussions, while challenging, have led to a more honest and balanced relationship than we've ever had before. Last Sunday, as we gathered for dinner at my parents' house, now a bi-weekly rather than weekly tradition to accommodate everyone's schedules, I watched my mother help Eliza with her mashed potatoes while my father discussed Marcus's recent promotion. Haley caught my eye across the table and gave me a small, knowing smile, acknowledgement of how far we'd all come from that disastrous dinner a year ago. The healing wasn't perfect or complete. Family relationships rarely are, but it was substantial and genuine. The painful confrontation that could have permanently damaged our family had instead forced necessary growth and recalibration. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to teach them how to respect your boundaries. It wasn't easy, but standing my ground that day changed all our relationships for the better. The guest room in my house is still mine, but now when my niece visits, it's because I genuinely want her there, not because anyone forced their way in. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between keeping the peace and standing up for yourself? In my experience, the temporary discomfort of conflict is always worth the lasting peace of honest relationships. Leave a comment below sharing your experience with family boundaries, and if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life stories about finding your voice. Thanks for listening. And remember, respecting boundaries isn't selfish. It's the foundation of healthy relationships that can truly stand the test of time.